my grandmother used to say, I remember, I'll tell you a quick story. I used to help her on the bottling line at Barton's. And when I was a little boy, in the summers, I'd go spend in Bardstown. And one time I handed her a label upside down. She put it on the bottle, and I felt so terrible about it. And she looked at me, she says, "Honey, don't worry about it. Nobody drinks this shit anyway."
Bringing to you the best stories from icons in the bourbon industry, it's Bourbon Pursuit. Now here are your hosts, Ryan and Kenny.
And we're back with another episode of the Bourbon Pursuit podcast. My name is Kenny, and this is the second show that I'm doing solo. Ryan can't make it again. We wish him and his family well wishes right now. He's still dealing with the whole new twin thing. But he will make it back on here eventually. He actually still listens to all the episodes because I still have to get everything shipped over to him, and he does all our intro and outro and editing and cutting and volume adjustments and stuff like that. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and give a shout out to one of our listeners today. So I want to go ahead and say thank you to Travis Roberts. So Travis actually contacted us to say go and check out our guest today. He's done that with a few guests, so we're going to go ahead and give him some props there. But we love it when you guys suggest people to interview because, we're just two pedestrian guys from Kentucky. We can always use some help. So email us if you have any suggestions to the duo at bourbonpursuit.com, or you can always send us a tweet to @bourbonpursuit. And at the same time, we also read every tweet and every email that comes our direction. And one of the things that has been asked time and time again was a problem with the volume. In our earlier episodes, it was too low. When we did everything at Buffalo Trace, we had this background of a fire crackling. We did our best to kind of edit it. And so right now we're going back and we're fixing everything. And we've gone back even in the first few episodes, and we've upped the game for some of those volumes. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to be fixing that as we go along. Everything is with anything, right? It's all trial and error, and we're still working out all the imperfections. So thank you for bearing with us. So with that, we'll go ahead and introduce our guest today. So today we have the newest member of the KDA, or the Kentucky Distillers Association, and they're the first to make moonshine and bourbon in Hardin County, Kentucky in over 120 years. So today we have the Master Distiller of Boundary Oak, Brent Goodin. So Brent, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Kendrick. Appreciate being here.
Good. So, before we get started talking about your brand and your distillery, let's talk about your bourbon story. So do you have like an earliest moment that you can remember with you and bourbon?
Oh, absolutely, and that's a great question. My grandmother worked for Barton's Distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky, since after World War II all the way up into the 1980s. She worked on the bottling line. Now, my grandmother loved everything Kentucky and everything to do with bourbon. Even back when bourbon wasn't so popular, my grandmother was always the flag bearer of those two things. So I can remember Christmas at my grandmother's in Bardstown, just within a stone's throw of the Barton's Distillery, having bourbon balls and bourbon cake and anything that she could put bourbon in, she would. So all of my memories early memories of Kentucky and of bourbon are always with her.
Well, I think she needs to go ahead and make us some samples of everything she made. That sounds delicious.
Absolutely. My grandmother has been gone for many years, but she loved her job at Barton's. When my grandfather died, she was still pregnant with my uncle, and so she had to raise all of her children all on her own, never remarried, and so Barton's became her surrogate husband, so to speak, and she loved every day she worked.
So are you picking up the family lineage of going back into the bourbon industry? Did your parents have any kind of ties or relations to it?
Well, our family was one of the early pioneers to Kentucky. We settled in Nelson County in about 1780. We had a trading fort. Most settlers at that time, distilling was really the only currency in the New World. And so distillation started with my great, whatever how many greats I can add there, grandfather Samuel Goodin, who came over from Pennsylvania. And they started distilling there along the Rolling Fork River up until the time when I think Kentucky became a state, and then a lot of the land that was the people had settled was then sold out from underneath them, as so did Abraham Lincoln's family. A lot of them then had to move to cities and find other kind of work. So yeah, distilling has been in our past not only from all of my uncles and modern age working in the distilleries, but even back 200 and plus years. So.
Yeah, so you said your uncles were in the distilling industry as well. So what kind of companies did they belong to, or what were their roles there as well?
They worked and my grandmother worked in bottling on the bottling line for many, many years at Barton's. Other uncles worked at Barton's and also at Jim Beam in production and in distribution. So and my other uncle also worked in the construction end of it and the building of distilleries. So if you're in Central Kentucky, somehow you're only just 1 degree removed from some type of distillery worker. I've always said so, and I'm the same.
Oh yeah, it sounds like it. And so you mentioned your grandma was from Bardstown. And did you grow up in Bardstown as well, or were you just from a neighboring area?
Hardin County. We're from here in Hardin County. My mother's side of the family are Downs. They're all from Bardstown. Our Goodins have been between Nelson County and Bardstown since, like I said, 1780. So we all just we didn't know how to swim across the Ohio River, so we.
Good. So I guess let's talk about now your uprising, right? So what led you to becoming a master distiller? What sort of influences did you have along the way?
Well, Kentucky, we are very, very fortunate. You can distill anywhere in the United States, but to distill in Kentucky, it really is an honor, I've always thought, and I do feel that way every day that I go to work. There is so much talent within a stone's throw of where we are here in Hardin County. Being so close to Nelson and Jefferson and Bullitt, where a lot of the distillation, the historic distillation, and also Woodford County and over towards Central Kentucky, we really are in the heart of bourbon country. Now, when I was young, that wasn't such a big deal. But here in the past 10, 15 years, the world has discovered what we love as bourbon, and so it's now a big deal. And so a lot of my experiences and a lot of my training came from people who had worked within the distilleries for many, many years, whose names I better not speak of, but I had some of the best teachers I think a person could ever have.
So I guess, how many years have you been kind of going at this and kind of, there's always the perfecting the palate. And, we've interviewed a few master distillers and, maybe a lot of them didn't even come from bourbon lineages. They started off as going to college and being chemists or whatever. And then they kind of just said, I live here in Kentucky and this seems like a pretty good job opportunity. And then all of a sudden they just fall into it. So I guess, how would that kind of happen for you?
Absolutely. That again, another great question. There, Chris Morris is brilliant. Willie Pratt from Michner's is another brilliant individual in the liquor business, and I'm honored to know those guys. Those guys have been in the industry a very, very long time. I came into it when we opened our distillery in 2013. I came at it from a different angle. I think I'm the average Joe, the average palate, and so I wanted to design our bourbon and design, as we call in the industry, all of our brown drinks would fit a more broad range where it wouldn't take a lot of experience or a lot of, you don't really have to have a real defined palate to be able to appreciate it. And that's really where our Kentucky Amber is, and that's really what it was designed around. It's really a bourbonish drink that almost anyone can enjoy.
So we'll talk about Kentucky Amber a little bit later when we actually get to some of the stuff you're distilling. And
sure.
Let's talk about a little bit about the distillery itself, right? So the name is Boundary Oak. So where does the name come from? Give us a little bit of background there.
Sure, absolutely. Our first distillery, we now have 2 distilleries. Our first distillery on Battle Training Road in Hardin County is in the northern part of Hardin County. It sits up on what's called the Muldrow Hill Escarpment. It's right before the beginning or the edge of the parts of the Ohio Valley down below us. Our elevation here is about 900 feet. It sits on solid limestone. It's what you would consider traditional in Kentucky, that traditional solid limestone from the base to the top, which gives us the absolute premium water that we need to be able to make bourbon, which makes all of our drinks really unique, not only me, but Jim Beam and makers and all of us that are here in Kentucky. Where our distillery is on part of an old family farm. There is a division line between 2 farms. in the old days, there would always be a marker in a survey that delineated a line between two parcels of land. One of those survey markers, as with lots of farms, is what was called a boundary oak tree or a boundary marker. And it just so happens we have a 150-year-old boundary oak tree that divides two pieces of property that sits up on top of a limestone shelf, and the water shoots out from underneath of this tree and starts the beginning of what's called Paddy Creek. The water, just enormous amounts of water come out from beneath this tree, so we named our distillery after the tree from which this water comes from that we use to distill.
I tell you what, I learn something new every day, and that's a fantastic little tidbit of knowledge there. I had no idea what a boundary oak was.
Absolutely. It's a common survey marker. They would put a big pin, and there's a big pin in the side of this tree that said this is a survey marker. They know that a lot of those big oaks would stand the test of time and wouldn't get lost in the ground clutter, and so, it's a very common practice.
So for any of our listeners who aren't familiar with Hardin County or Radcliffe, give them some sort of relation to where that is on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, whether you're coming from Louisville or Lexington or Bardstown, those sorts of areas.
Great. We are on just off what we call the Golden Circle. If you come down I-65, we're probably only about 10 miles from the Jim Beam plant. You get off either at the Joe Prather Parkway, which is the brand new interstate that runs to Radcliffe, and we're just both distilleries are accessible off of that road. So, that's if you're going south. Now, if you're coming north, it's the same way as you're going to Jim Beam. We're an easy hop off to come up and see our new and our old distillery. So we really feel we really are on the Bourbon Trail for sure.
Fantastic. So, I don't get to use this word very often, but what's it mean to be the first distillate in Hardin County after a centennial, plus some years?
Oh, it's a great feeling. It really is. To me, it's an honor, and it's also it's an honor to be able to do that in Hardin County and to do that for the people in Hardin County who appreciate it. In Kentucky, whether you drink or not, I think everyone appreciates the fact that bourbon is so well known across the world. It really is our number one export. Us and Kentucky Fried Chicken, the most for the world. And I've had nothing but wonderful compliments about it, and people really do feel like they have ownership in it, and I want them to. It's not only my first barrel and bottle of bourbon, it's also theirs. So I think I get more joy seeing them appreciate it more than myself.
Yeah, and with that, if you Google Boundary Oak Distillery, the website doesn't even come up first, right? It's all these articles and all these news outlets that say like, oh, it's the first 120 years that's been since Hardin County's actually been distilling. But then there's also another Insider Louisville article that came out, and it talks about a record being broken for the most paid for a bottle of bourbon. So give us a little bit of inside story about what that all is about.
Sure, absolutely. We produced our first barrel last winter. Of course, the bottle won't be out. It's just a young bourbon. It's a 2-year-old bourbon. It won't be out until 2 years from the date we filled it. And what that was, we wanted to do something for charity. So what we did is we pre-sold those bottles. The people had the opportunity to come in and sign their name on a barrel. And then in 2 years, they have the opportunity then to come back and then buy that bottle at a local liquor store or here at our new distillery, which will have the ability to sell liquor. So that first bottle, an individual gave $25,500 to charity for the right to be able to then purchase that bottle when it came out in the future. And so that made that the most expensive bottle, so to speak, of liquor in American history. So not only did we break the bourbon record, which would have been set by 2 bottles of liquor from the George Washington distillery, but it also broke it for any kind of liquor in American history. So we felt very we were surprised, and we were very honored with that, and we're very excited. So it's out of the chute. Our first bottle sold for the most in American history. So we've got we've got big shoes to fill.
That's fantastic news. You know, that's what I really hope I can get to the point one day where I can just throw 28 grand in a bottle and be like, all right, this will be some good shelf candy that I can always look at.
Isn't that great? And you did say 28, and that's correct. There was more money given to it at the very end. It was all given to charity. It fed a lot of people to Helping Hand of Hope, which then dispersed that out into food. So we loved that. We loved that we could do that with Helping Hand, and the individual who bought that bottle was so excited that they could also help people and also be a part of history. So it's kind of like a double whammy, so to speak.
So at the same time, I think I also read that they were taking that bottle and donating it to the Hardin County History Museum or something like that. Is that correct?
It is correct. And so that bottle, once it's filled, will go to the History Museum and then be on display, and hopefully that record will stand for a while. I think the uniqueness about this and what I love, obviously a 2-year-old bourbon in itself is not that valuable. It's the historical significance of that bottle being, I tell people, well, how great it would be to have the first bottle of Jim Beam or the first bottle of Jack Daniels. Not that I feel that I'm in the same category as those guys, but, they started off small too. And so we felt that we gave somebody that opportunity, and we're tickled to death that it comes back here to Hardin County and we can put it on display for people to see. And on another note, I'll throw this out there. Anytime that we can beat Scotch whiskey in the world is always a good thing.
It's a good day when that happens, right?
It's a good thing, and it's always been Scotch that always held the records. So this was the first time that a bourbon, so to speak, or a bourbon had ever even entered that realm of dollar amounts into the Scotch world. So we got some really good front page news articles in Ireland and Scotland. I think one of the very first bourbon distilleries to ever do that. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. So are there any skeptics to who this magical donor was that put forth all this money? Is there any kind of hypothesis around it?
Oh, absolutely. And I just had a talk with them last week, and they own Bluegrass Tank Company. They're here in Elizabethtown. They are bourbon lovers, bourbon connoisseurs. They were very humble in the fact that they didn't want the world to know that they had donated all that money. But I'd like to thank the guys over there for absolutely for making that bid. And so when we have the announcement here, we'd love for you guys to be there. Here in the future, in a year, we'll let them guys do the donating, and the world can see their face.
Good deal. So you talked a little bit. You said it a few times that you're aging your bourbon for 2 years. Now, to most consumers, that might seem a little underaged. It might not have the characteristics that maybe most people are looking for. So, is there something different that you're aging your bourbon to give it a bolder flavor palette than something that people are just going to think they're just going to shy away from it after the first taste?
Well, this first bourbon, this first barrel, we're bringing it out for 2 years just for the historical fact of it. The majority of our bourbon will be the classic 4 to 5 year bourbon. But just this first bourbon we brought out in 2 years. My father is 81 years old, and I wanted to make sure that they got to experience that first bourbon coming out. So it's not, traditionally 4 to 7 years is the sweet spot for bourbon and aging. In all of our bourbon, we'll stay true to that, our normal bourbon that we put down. But just for this historical barrel, we're bringing it out in 2 years. So it's not something that I think people are going to. I mean, obviously, it would be a palatable, good bourbon. I don't want anybody to get me wrong. I think we can do a good job in 2 years. But our normal bourbon will be the classic 4 to 7.
So you said earlier your operation was how many square feet?
We have 2 distilleries. We've got a 40-acre distillery that's on Battle Training Road. That's where we do all of our distilling now. We're just now in our new distillery, which is about 5 miles, is in Radcliffe, Kentucky. So we have one in Elizabethtown, one in Radcliffe. Is in a facility that was pre-existing that is absolutely going to be probably, without a doubt, one of the nicest craft distilleries in America. It's 11,500 square feet. We have a 500-gallon pot still on order that will be here in the end of August, along with a 125-gallon finish still that will go into this facility. A nice state-of-the-art bottling plant will be here. And also we have a 30-seat, where I'm talking to you from now, a 30-seat movie theater that people can see movies that we're doing about the history of bourbon and also about our distillery, and we just have it's a meeting hall where people can come in and have facilities to have meetings, and then take a tour of the distillery or wander around our campus up here. So we intend to also have monthly distillers workshops for anybody who wants to be able to come for a Saturday and distill their own liquor and be able to get a bottle of liquor that they can take home. So we're going to be doing some stuff like that people can participate in, and we're really excited about it.
No, it sounds pretty awesome. So I guess, you said at first you started off with 2 barrels. So I guess how many barrels can your operation hold at this current state?
Well, we can handle as much as we can make. Our facility on Battle Training Road is set up more to store bourbon. Up here at our facility in Radcliffe, we can manufacture bourbon, but most likely most of the bourbon will be sent back to the Battle Training Road facility where we can store it. So we're kind of bridging the gap here. We have a nice modern distillery will be on the Bourbon Trail, and then also our older distillery, which is down the road here, that allow us to be able to store liquor in more of a country type setting. Not that bourbon needs to be in a country setting, but we have more room there to store more barrels.
So with all these different barrels being all these different places, are you guys thinking like, we can have multiple different brands? Are you thinking like we're just going to do a blend of all of them and have a consistent flavor palette? What's your kind of your goal for that 4 to 7 year mark when you get those barrels ready?
Great question. We intend to have at least 2 major brands, we think, maybe 3 major brands. If you count our amber, that would be 4. With aging whiskey, there really is an art. Willie Pratt, I think, is probably one of the most educated men in the world when it comes to barrel aging. He's been a wonderful friend, and I learned a lot from him. Climate, temperature, type of winters, type of summers, really, really add to that barrel, doing that work to blend that bourbon and making it unique. Another thing with us, everything we put in the barrel is true pot still. So, we're not going to be doing, 1,000 barrels a day. We'll probably be doing 5 to 6 barrels a day at the most. So each one of those barrels are completely unique and completely, you know this industry. A pot still is going to give you a much different flavor profile than a column still is going to give you. So we're not out to make the most. I think we're out to make some of the best, most unique bourbons in the world.
So if I can throw a name out there, I think you should just do like Goodin small batch, right? I think it has like a good like old timey ring to it, right?
How much do I owe you for that?
Well, let me go ahead and trademark it real quick, and then you can pay me for it.
There you go.
So, with that, with these few barrels that are coming out, and with these other ones you're thinking of, like, do you guys have like price points in mind of what these are going to cost consumers when they actually do start hitting market?
Well, a true pot still bourbon obviously is going to be much more expensive than a column still. And for listeners who don't know the difference, a column still is like going to McDonald's. You've got a continuous run of French fries or a continuous run of hamburgers, and that in this instance it would be a continuous run of liquor coming out. Where a pot still is just like going to your grandma's house and having her making you one pot of French fries. So when we make a pot of liquor in a pot still, you're getting all of the flavors and all the uniqueness of those grains or whatever you're making with that goes to your column, that goes to your distillant. So it's a slower process. So you get to really experience how bourbon was made before the introduction of the continuous still in the late 1800s. This is how Scotch is made, so to speak. So the exciting thing about it is you've got companies like Willet that are going to be coming out with some of this wonderful bourbon, this pot-stilled bourbon. They've got the jump on us other guys, and so they've got a lot of bourbon put up just going to set the world on fire, I'm telling you now. And you're going to have a lot of other craft distillers that are all following in behind making these pot still bourbons. So I think our offering to the world will be limited, but will be very appreciative by people who enjoy bourbon. And if you can get one of them, you can get a bottle, you've got a real prize.
That sounds great. I think that's something that, we're enthusiasts ourselves, right? But we don't know the ins and outs of everything that goes into actually making and the taste that go into the difference between the column and the pot still. So no, it's definitely even good. See, like I'm learning two things today, so I'm really glad you came on the show. Right?
It's like an educational seminar.
That's the way I'd put it. We should just change our taglines now.
There you go.
So with most distillery startups, you already have a product to sell, and we talked about it already, Kentucky Amber. So let's give our listeners a little bit of a taste of what Kentucky Amber is all about.
Oh, this is very exciting. Kentucky Amber is truly a historic Kentucky product. It's not like we just went out and decided, hey, let's make something that's palatable. Kentucky Amber, if you talk to old distillery guys or you talk to people who've lived in Kentucky, they'll talk to you about what Jim Beam calls devil's cut. And what devil's cut is the liquor that's stuck into the wood of the barrel, what we call the stave. So inside of that stave absorbs all of those sugars along with some residual alcohol. They'll dump that barrel in 10 to 15 minutes, and then that barrel's discarded. Traditionally in Kentucky, those barrels would then be taken and put some distillant along in there, some alcohol, very limited amount, and they would roll it around or they would leave it into a hot spot in Kentucky, and then out would come what they would either call stave liquor or they would call barrel sweat, which is not the most endearing name, or devil's cut, as Jim Beam calls it. Now, Jim Beam calls it the premium part of the bourbon. And so when I started my distillery, I made a promise to the distillers who taught me how to distill that I would make this product because this is the product they loved and they felt needed to be representative in Kentucky. And so, again, what it is the premium liquor that's left in the barrel. Now, we only get about 3 gallons out of each barrel, and we have a process that we use. It's different than everybody else. It's more of a traditional process. That we go in and remove all of that amber liquor that's left inside that wood, and what you come out with is probably the sweetest, most, it's woody tasting, of course, but it's probably the best finishing bourbon you've ever had in your life. We've got a lot of Scotch people who just absolutely love this because it's the same color of Scotch, because as probably some of our listeners know, that all of our whiskey barrels go to Scotland to make Scotch after they're done. So you get that same color of Scotch, but the way we take it out here traditionally in Kentucky is a certain way, and we reproduce that in Kentucky Amber. The first time true 100% devil's cut has been put in a barrel bottle.
And so, can you get Kentucky Amber across the nation now, or is it just only in Kentucky? Like, where can consumers go and get this today?
Liquor Barn, anywhere here in Hardin County, and you will always be able to find it here at the distillery when the distillery is open. At our new distillery, when we're open up here, you can always get it. It's the same price, generally about Angel's Envy. It's right in that same $40 price range. But what I love about it, and what a lot of our bourbon drinkers is, they love to have something completely unique. There's nothing else like this being made. Even though Jim Beam does do a devil's cut, really what they do is they use their devil's cut to proof down their column still liquor. They'll use part of that devil's cut or water and they'll go in and proof down their liquor. Ours is 100% the liquor that comes out of that stave. So yeah, you should be able to get it anywhere. Liquor Barn will have it. We'll have it in all the liquor barns here in the future, and we're hoping Kroger's, our local Kroger's, all of our local liquor stores have it here. There was such a limited amount of it that we didn't have a lot to go away. We sold every bottle we had in 35 minutes. So it's had a really wonderful response, and I'd love for people to try it. It's just really unique and really traditionally Kentucky.
I'm sort of salivating right now. Now I'm thinking I need to go run out and go hit Liquor Barn on the way home right now and pick one up. You
will love it. It really is a very unique. It's historic. It's a very unique drink, and if you drink it, you'll love it. And it has such a neat story with it. So
yeah, because I remember my first bottle of Jim Beam's Devil's Cut, and when I first had it, at least the first drink of it kind of took you by surprise because you didn't really expect it. It's very very charcoaly and smoky kind of taste to it. But I tell you what, it makes a mean Manhattan. I remember that. I used it to make Manhattans, and it was incredibly good. But I'm definitely going to take your Kentucky Amber and definitely try it all neat and see how I like it. It sounds great.
It's going to be completely different than what you're used to from Jim Beam. God bless Jim Beam. We love our friends at Jim Beam. They do a wonderful job, make some incredible liquor, and have done wonders for Kentucky. But the devil's cut that we do is 100% devil's cut out of the barrel. Generally, what other distilleries do is they'll take their barrels and they'll fill them full of water, and that watery mix that pulls that devil's cut out, they will then use that to proof down their normal bourbon. Well, this is completely different. We go in and pull out just the devil's cut, or just the stave liquor, or the amber out of the stave, and that's 100% when you taste it. And you'll taste it. You'll say, "Oh my God, this is something completely new and different." We're going to sell our very first bottle of Kentucky Amber, which will be, like I said, not only our first bottle, but the very first bottle of its kind ever at Liquor Barn in an auction here in the future, we hope. And so people will have the opportunity. Maybe we might even break our own record with this.
Oh, man, I don't know. You're setting the bar pretty high right there.
That's right. So
so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We didn't ask, when's the new place going to be open so people can go visit?
Sure. We hope to be, we'll definitely be open by the spring here. We would love to be open by Christmas. I think that's pretty wishful thinking. You know, we're dealing with the Treasury Department. We have to get our DSP. We'll probably have an additional DSP for this facility. So you have to go through that process. Sometimes that can be lengthy. It can take a long time to get that done. Being that we already have one distillery, we hope that this one will go quicker. But we'll definitely be open by the spring. We'll hopefully have a sign on 65, and it's a wonderful drive to get here down Joe Prather Parkway, and a really interesting facility, and pretty hands-on. So we've got a lot to show people.
Well, great. So if anybody wants to learn more about the distillery, how can they do that?
Sure. BoundaryOakDistillery.com on the internet, and you can just Google our name, and you can see, like you said, all the articles that's been written about us. We've had more than our fair share of good press. So,
fantastic. And there's also a Twitter handle. I think it's at Boundary Oak, that people can go and get a hold of you through there as well.
Absolutely.
Great. So again, Brent, thank you so much for being on the show today, dropping some knowledge with the columns versus the pot stills. It was very intriguing. I think everybody's going to be very anticipating the releases of this when they do come out.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So if you like what you hear, go ahead and like us on Facebook, like us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter. Go ahead and write a few reviews on iTunes. We definitely appreciate it. If you have anybody that you want to see on the show, as we mentioned at the very beginning, please get at us. We love getting any kind of comments from our listeners because it just helps us make the show better. Especially you on that commute to work, you want to make sure you're listening to good quality stuff. So again, thank you all very much. Thank you, Brent, once again. And until next time.